Do you at times have the thought that God doesn't seem very present to me? Or do you ever feel like you don't see God working in your life? And I think that it's experienced by a lot of people, and there's probably a number of reasons for it. But today's gospel, I just proclaimed, gives us one possible reason. We just heard St. Mark's account of the healing of the blind man Bartimaeus, so I won't repeat it. But I just want to emphasize a couple points about it. The first one is this. Notice how active Bartimaeus is with Jesus. Once he hears that Jesus is drawing near to him, he cries out to Jesus. And even when Mark says people are rebuking him, telling him to be silent, he just cries out all the louder. He wants to get to Jesus because he knows that he can heal him. And we see Jesus makes it happen. He responds to Bartimaeus' efforts by answering his prayer. He heals Bartimaeus' blindness. What strikes me in particular about this account is that I think the clear implication from the gospel is that although Jesus, as he walked on the road, drew near to Bartimaeus, the encounter between the two of them would not have happened if Bartimaeus had not cried out. The implication seems to be Jesus would have just kept on his way. But he stopped, as Mark says, because he heard him crying out to him. And so I guess, that's kind of the point, meaning this. It's very true that in the life of faith, everything depends on God. It's God who has to take the initiative to draw near to us. But at the same time, it's also true that some movement, some response on our part is also required. We need to be active. And sometimes I wonder, what things God would do in and through us if we responded more to his invitations. Maybe think about it, if you would, in our own lives. Do we experience Jesus walking by? Do we experience him calling us like he did with Bartimaeus? Offering to speak to us, to encounter us, to help us. It may be, brothers and sisters, that actually happens more frequently than we think. It may be that we don't experience him more often because we're not attentive to and responsive to his presence like Bartimaeus was. For example, some people decide they don't need to go to Mass every week. Isn't that a time where the Lord may be drawing by and calling to them and inviting them into some encounter with him? And it doesn't happen because they don't respond to those initiatives. Somebody would say, well, come on, Father Paul. If I saw Jesus walk by, I would cry out like Bartimaeus did. I'd jump up and go to him, which I guess is another point, meaning Bartimaeus did not see Jesus. He's blind. The only reason he knew that Jesus was near is because he heard about it from other people. And oftentimes I think the Lord uses other people to let us become aware of him drawing near to us. They invite us to a retreat. They invite us to a Bible study. Or they give us an invitation to join in some service situation. And in saying this, I'm not saying that literally every time we hear some invitation about church that we're expected to attend. There are other dimensions of our life that God expects us to be attentive to and responsible for. That's true. What I am saying is very often the Lord uses other people to let us know that he's drawing near and to extend his invitations to us. And the reverse can also be true, that at times other people can keep us from accepting invitations from the Lord. It almost happened with Bartimaeus, right? If he starts crying out, they tell him to be quiet. If he had listened to them, he wouldn't have encountered the Lord. He'd still be sitting on that roadside. And so the same can be true with us, that at times what they think about us or the things they say maybe deter us from responding to some of the invitations that the Lord has given to us. Pope Francis recounted a story about himself that's an example of what I'm saying about responding to the Lord. So when he was in high school, he was 17 years old, so obviously not Pope Francis at that point, Mario Bergoglio. And on this particular day, it was a holiday, and so he is on his way from his home to a park to meet up with some of his friends. They're going to have a picnic and play soccer, and it was the first day of spring. So as he's walking along, he passes a church. He says, as I'm passing by, I just felt this urge to go to confession. So he followed the prompting, and he went into the church and asked the priest to hear his confession. And of that event, now Pope Francis says this, something strange happened to me in that confession. I don't know what it was, but it changed my life. I think it surprised me. It caught me with my guard down. He said, that's the religious experience. The astonishment of meeting someone who has been waiting for you all along. From that moment on, for me, God is the one who springs it on you. So he's reflecting there on the fact that it was a surprise encounter, God kind of waiting and springing on him, but also was the first day of spring. And so for me now, he says, God is the one who springs it on you. You search for him, but he searches for you first. You want to find him, but he finds you first. It strikes me that in the gospel, Jesus is the one walking by, and Bartimaeus calls out to him. In Pope Francis's situation, he's the one walking by the church, and he experiences the Lord calling out to him by prompting him to go to confession. How it happens doesn't really matter so much. What really matters is that in both cases, Bartimaeus and Mario Bergoglio, they seized the moment when they heard that Jesus was near. And both of their lives were changed profoundly for the better. And so, brothers and sisters, for us, what really matters is our readiness, our willingness to respond to the invitations as we sense them coming to us from the Lord, either directly from him or through other people. And to be open, as Pope Francis says, to let our guard down and encounter the Lord, and let him be active and work in our life, and bring us to the fullness of life that he really desires for us.